Started. Good evening. I am John Lars's friend. Once a year, I have the honor of opening the tab meeting. That's this month since we didn't meet in the month of May. So welcome. So the first thing I want to mention is our two new appointed members. We have Lemire over here, who's full board member, and we have Adam over here, who is our alternate for this year.
Thank you.
Yeah. So next item is the approval of the minutes. We have two separate sets of minutes to approve based on comments desired. So I will open up for the minutes of March 27th. Open it up for approval. Yeah. So we vote on the consent, or we ask for comment first. Or? Okay. Open up minutes of March 27th for comment. Right, seeing as there's no comments, open up for approval. I guess we'll do all in favor.
Unanimous consent.
Unanimous consent. Man, you should do this. So we can approve these the minutes of March 27th, 2024 by unanimous consent. Cool. Those minutes are approved. Moving on to the minutes of April 24th. Open those up for comment. Okay. See no comment. Open those up for consent. Unanimous consent as well. All in favor? Great. Any opposed? None. Good. The minutes of April 24th are adopted. Next, we have public comment. Seeing as we have a couple of those to your thoughts, great. We have no one in person for public comment. Looks like we don't have anyone online for public comment, so we can close out public comment this time. Okay, so moving on to regular business. Item 4, which is chair and vice chair nominations and elections. This is an action. So first, I'd like to open up nominations. You can nominate somebody, or you can nominate yourself. Are there any chair nominations this evening?
I'll nominate myself for chair.
Great. Are there any?
I was gonna nominate Julie as well. So
Okay. Any other chair nominations this evening? Seeing as there are none, I guess we can do, I guess with one, we can do unanimous consent. So by unanimous consent, electing Julie as chair, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Great. Congratulations, Julie. You're chair for this year.
Thank you.
Yeah. I'll let you take it from here.
I'll take it away.
Yes.
Okay. The next, great to be chair for this term. Happy to serve in this role. Now we'll open it up for vice chair nominations. So if there are any nominations for vice chair, feel free to nominate yourself or nominate another person. I will nominate Tom. Are there any other nominations? Let me know. Any other nominations? No? If that's it, we'll close those nominations, close that nomination, and we will, by unanimous consent, will vote in Tom McDonald as our vice chair for the next term. Cool.
all those in favor and they.
By unanimous consent, we can do this. Yeah. Cool. Okay. So, vice chair. Very cool. Okay. With that said, we will go on to discuss the Black Nugget retaining wall replacement agenda item. with Jim Kobe.
Can we close either of those doors?
Yes, yeah, I'll work on it.
I can do that.
I just didn't know if there's like a reason we were leaving them open at this point. Oh, that's just distracting.
So I'm Jim Jacoby, Senior Transportation Engineer with City Public Works. I'm here to talk to you tonight about the Black Thunder retaining wall replacement project. Online with me, I have Bruce Erickson and Steve Schmitz from KPFF for the design consultants on the project.
Hi, nice to meet you guys.
Welcome.
So a little outline, what we're going to talk about, do some background, and talk about the existing wall that's there. We'll talk about some of the new wall options we're considering, and the roadway options we're considering. And then we'll look at some analysis and of our preferred wall and road option. So what we're looking for from you guys tonight is basically feedback on those options that we can hopefully incorporate as we move forward. So jumping into an aerial, so the red line is the existing wall. The large white rectangle in the middle is the roof of Fred Meyer for reference. Down and to the right of that is Home Depot. And obviously Black Nugget Road is runs behind Fred Meyer and Home Depot. So here's some recent photos of the wall. It's not in the best shape. You can see some vegetation growing through it. You can see the dark stains on it where water is seeping through the wall. Kind of hard to tell from the photos, but if you get up close to the wall, you can see that it's definitely rusting on the steel elements of the wall. So it's maybe a little hard to tell, but you can kind of see in this lower left photo, there's a pretty steep slope above the wall as well. And the existing sidewalk and roadway run basically right up to the wall. So there's not much gap there.
How much of a sidewalk next to that wall, or is it?
Yeah, there's a 5-foot sidewalk.
There is sidewalk.
So this has some history on the project. So this wall and blocking the road were actually originally constructed by a private developer back in 1999. It was later annexed by the city shortly after construction as part of North Issaquah. And kind of fast forward to about 2010, the city started noticing corrosion and issues on the wall. Had some analysis done, and then over the next 10 years, conducted several different repairs. Actually, jump back here. So you can kind of see in the upper left photo, there's an X across the wall and some diagonal pieces. So those are some of the repairs that were done.
Actually, I used to live up there and I think I remember seeing those repairs go in.
Yeah.
Isn't there responsibility back to the original developer builder in the wall?
No, unfortunately. So then in 2021 and 2022, city hired 2 engineers to take another look at the wall. They noted significant corrosion and ultimately recommended replacing the wall in short term. So that is kind of the key why we're here and why we're looking at this project is ultimately we need to replace the wall. So here's kind of an angled view down at it. This is, and the bottom is the roof of Fred Meyer again. So you can see kind of the extent of the wall. It runs, you know, it's longer than the entire Fred Meyer store. It's 5,000 feet long, about 35 feet high at the highest point. But obviously, as I said before, a steep slope above the wall. You've actually got a short, steep slope kind of below the roadway in this photo. And then another wall behind Fred Meyer that we recently discovered was built by the same developer during this same development. But that one's not owned by the city, that is on the Fred Meyer property.
So it looks like in this photo where the native soils are, the wall's worse condition. And the type action nails that are in there as opposed to the fill soil.
They're both pretty bad, to be perfectly honest. So some of the repairs in that first photo were actually on the left side of the wall here. So the fill soils on the left, that was actually an old quarry that was later backfilled. So the soils there are not as great. And as we'll get into later, we're looking at 3 different options for that part of the wall and the fill zone on the left. And then basically 1 option for the better soils, the native soils on the right. So as I said, we're looking at 3 different options for the worst fill soils on the left hand side of the wall there. Option 1 is the soldier pile wall in front of the existing wall. So soldier pile wall is basically what we have existing there. So basically a bunch of massive steel I-beams, you know, standing straight up and down. So option 1 would be replacing the wall with something similar to what's there. But putting a new wall and losing some space because we've been putting the new wall in front of that existing. Option 2 is the same sort of thing, only we'd be putting that wall behind the existing wall, so gaining some space for the road and the sidewalk, etc. And option 3 is a ground anchor or soil anchor wall, where we'd be putting anchors through the existing wall and then putting a new fascia or new wall over top of the existing wall in front of it.
So option 3, you would retain the existing wall. Option 2, if you do it behind you, take out the existing wall. And 1, would you retain the existing wall?
Right.
Also, so you'd have whatever condition it's in, but the new wall.
Right. So for option 1 and 3, we leave that existing wall in place. We wouldn't be touching it really. We'd just be building a new wall in front of it as if there wasn't a wall there before. If that makes sense. So, and on the native soils, the better soils on the right-hand side of that photo earlier, we're looking at a soil no wall for that. So that's, you know, ground anchors going through the existing wall. That existing wall stays in place, and we'd just be putting a new fascia in front of that.
Could you clarify what you mean by better soils?
Denser. So the native soils are glacially overridden. So when the glaciers were here, you know, 10,000 plus years ago, they rode over the existing soils at that time, compacted those really well. And so that's kind of what's left there right now.
So they're less erodible?
Yeah. So much more dense, much stronger, much better for, you know, building on, or in this case, you know, putting a wall next to it.
Like, you mean better in an engineering
Yeah,
sense?
better in an engineering.
Yeah.
sense.
To grow things from that, okay.
No, not in that sense, no.
Yeah.
So for option 1, this is kind of a top-down view of what that would look like. So on the upper part here, that's the existing soldier piles and the existing tiebacks. So we'd essentially be building that new wall in front of the existing wall, and it'd be sort of a similar configuration, but we'd just be staggering it so that we can put new tiebacks in between the existing solar piles. But in this option, we'd lose about 4.5 feet of space for the road and sidewalk, et cetera.
So there probably wouldn't be a sidewalk there then.
Yeah, it'd be challenging if we went with this option.
How wide is the street now? Is it 12-foot lane or 11-foot?
It's 12-foot lanes, and we'll get to that here in a little bit, but yeah, it's 12-foot lanes and a 12-foot center lane. And 5-foot sidewalk on either side.
lane?
Okay.
So option 2 that we looked at is the new shoulder pile wall behind that existing wall. So we have the existing wall here on the bottom. The new wall would go behind that. You know, it'd be nice to gain that extra space for the road, but there's some challenges that we'll talk about here in a minute with that. And then option 3 is the ground anchors. So we have those ground anchors going in between the existing piles. That existing wall stays in place, and then the new wall would stick out about 2 feet in front of that existing wall.
So that one, you're still counting on the existing wall to retain some of the strength of the.
No, actually, for none of these, we're not counting on that existing wall at all. We're designing the wall as if it's not there, even though for option 1 and 3, it'll still be there. We're pretending, you know, for design purposes that it's not there.
So then the new anchors would be tied to the new facial wall.
Yeah.
And that'd be the.
Yeah.
Okay.
Are there any water mitigation or other changes that extend beyond the wall, like into the road, that would be relevant for today's discussion?
You mean like drainage for?
Yeah, so like, given the amount of water that's seeping through the wall now, presumably there's some part of this.
Yeah, I mean, that's one of the deficiencies of the current wall is that there wasn't proper drainage behind the wall. There's also not you know, a gutter and proper drainage structures above that existing wall. I didn't have any pictures in there of that, but normally for a permanent wall, you'd have a gutter on top of the wall to kind of contain any water that's coming down a hill and hitting that wall and kind of diverting that, but this wall wasn't constructed with any of that, so.
Yeah, so you've presented this as being an additional 2 feet to the end of the new wall.
Yeah.
Is there any additional drainage or anything beyond that?
No, the drainage would be built essentially, you know, above and behind that new wall.
And how much would this, the option 3, how far would that extend out?
So this is about 2 feet in front of that.
Okay, yeah.
So we use about 2 feet.
Are all of these like similarly strong structurally, or is like one stronger than the other or something like that?
No, I mean, they're all gonna be able to be structurally sound and hold back the hillside there.
I feel like we need this wall because otherwise the hillside just falls apart and all the houses on it, right? Like that's like.
Eventually, yeah, eventually the existing wall is gonna corrode enough that, you know, it's gonna start failing. It's gonna start leaning and, you know, yeah, it's gonna look dangerous.
And then there's a landslide that goes to Fred Meyer.
Yeah.
Nice.
I figured it was there for a reason, but it's good to just say that out loud.
Yeah.
Like, we do need this to.
Yes, we do need it.
Are there cost comparisons between the three also?
Yeah, we'll get to that in a second. So here's kind of the soil metal wall. So then again, this is the right side, the native soils, better engineering soils, I should say, on the right side. So kind of similar to the ground anchor option 3 that we just looked at. There'd just be more of the soil nails going through the wall, and then that wall would stick out a little over a foot in front of the existing wall. So kind of similar to option 3.
So the other one showed rebar going all throughout the concrete new wall, but this one just shows rebar through in a couple of spots between the existing piles.
Yeah, so these are not like final drawings by any stretch. These are, you know, conceptual. But yeah, the concrete for also would have some sort of steel or, you know, wire mesh in them.
But so the difference here is that here you're supporting the wall by driving like nails into the soil. So it's So it doesn't need as much support that goes out, is the idea, right?
Yeah.
Which is why it's a lot thinner. It's just supporting on the back instead of the front.
Right, so a soil nail wall is kind of creating a block of soil by putting in these nails, and then you fill the hole around them with concrete grout. And then that kind of locks in and creates this, cohesive block of soil.
Yeah.
That's sort of like all connected and helps hold the front of the wall up.
So given that this is essentially the solution for the eastern part of the wall, and we've got 1 foot 2 inches of extent beyond that, does that reduce some of the benefit that we would get of option 2, where essentially that part of the road would already be narrow?
Yeah, I mean, we could consider option 2 for this side as well. But as we'll kind of get into, it's a lot more expensive.
All the excavation, I would assume.
Yeah, not only that, but just constructability. So just comparison of the 3 options. So the pluses are, better than the other options, minuses are worse than other options, and then the blue slashes are kind of in the middle. So first off, the cost, obviously building the new wall behind the option 2, building a new wall behind that existing wall is going to be much more expensive than the other options. And option 3 is by far the least expensive. The other issue with option 2 is that in order to build that wall behind the existing, we need some sort of bench or, essentially a large amount of rock or dirt would need to be brought in so that you can get the construction equipment up to build that wall behind the existing wall. So that alone means you probably have to shut down the road completely during construction. Be very expensive to bring all that material in to build that bench to get the equipment up there.
How long would the road end up being shut for?
Probably 1.5 to 2 years, I would guess. Long, yeah, it would not a great option, unfortunately.
That's specific to option 2, right?
Yeah, that's only option 2. That's why it's the only negative in that row. And then for the last row, right of way, gained or lost. Obviously, option 2 wins in that regard because that's the only option where we'd be gaining usable right of way for the road. But option 3, we lose a smaller amount than option 1. So that's why it's kind of in the middle on those.
Is there any factor that makes option 3 worse than option 1?
Not really.
So why is option 1 on here?
Well, it was one that we considered initially, but yeah, it's clearly not the best option. As you can probably tell already, option 3 is our preferred option. Not least because it's the cheapest. Yeah, these are kind of the preliminary cost estimates for the 3 options. Now, these do include that soil mill wall on the eastern, better engineering soil portion. So all these options, all these numbers include that. They don't include some things like contingency and inflation, but to give you a rough idea, option 2, building that wall behind the existing wall is, more than 50% more than option 3. So several $1 million more to gain a few feet of right of way. So moving into the different roadway options, kind of group these into 2 kind of categories. 1, keep the center turn lane, essentially keep the road as is, or kind of the second option, add bike lanes or a bike lane and a landscaping, planting strip.
How many turnoffs are there on that road?
I think there's 9 total on the whole stretch, but as far as along the actual wall, there's only 1.
You want to show the skylighting?
Wait, what is that on the one? Oh, it's the thing.
If there's, yeah, because that's relevant to whether you want to keep the central turn lane. I think.
Yeah, let's jump back to that.
I guess just the one into Fred Meyer Home Depot, right?
Oh,
Yeah, so there's really only one turn. It's at Southeast 62nd. It's a Red Myron Home Depot there.
Yeah.
There are several more turns up the hill, and obviously there's one down by Best Buy in 24 minutes. But you've got, the two office buildings here, and then several more for the apartments up the hill. But
And we'd only be altering the stretch by the wall.
well, that's something we'll get into. We looked at, what it would take to, whether we could simply restripe the rest of the road to kind of match what we're doing in front of the wall. Yeah, we'll get back to that in a second. So on Monday, I actually presented this project to Mobility and Infrastructure Committee, City Council, basically to ask them for permission to kind of present all this information to you guys and, later to the general public, because the roadway sections that we're going to look at are not, in compliance with current city street standards for this kind of road, which we'll talk about in a second. But yeah, they agreed that we can go ahead and move forward and present these to you. So that's why I'm here. So kind of for reference, here's the current city street standards for a collector road like Black Mega Road. So you'd have, starting from the left, a 5-foot sidewalk, a 5-foot planting strip or landscaping strip, a 5-foot bike lane. You have your two 11-foot road lanes, and then another bike lane, landscaping strip and sidewalk on the side. So that's about 53 feet minimum to have all of that. And here's what we have existing now on Black Nugget Road currently along the wall. So you have about 12-foot travel lanes, a 12-foot center turn lane, and then roughly a 5-foot sidewalk on each side. So that's about 47 feet to include the curbs. So less than the 53 that we would need to meet the current city street standards. So here's kind of wall option one, showing this one with bike lanes. So if you remember, we're losing about 4.5 feet with option one. But if we remove this in our turn lane, that gains us 12 feet back, and we could comfortably add in a 5-foot bike lane. But we'd have to reduce those travel lanes down to 10 feet wide each. Then kind of a similar option for the road is we could, again, remove the center turn lane, but instead of adding 2 bike lanes, we could add a bike lane on the uphill side. So for people biking uphill, we'll have a bike lane. And then on the downhill side, we could put in a planting strip or landscaping strip on that side.
It's like a 10% grade going up that hill at some spot there.
It's about 12% for basically all of it. And it's a long stretch where there's no breaks. It's like I think 250 feet of elevation gain or something. So it's quite a long, steep stretch of road. So yeah, this is option 2, but as we talked about earlier, it's not really our preferred option, even though it would gain us some usable right of way. And this is option 3, wall option 3, with retaining the center turn lane. And in order to kind of make up for that 2-foot loss of width with this new wall, we could just reduce the travel lanes from 12 feet down to 11 feet. So we gain that 2 feet back. But this option essentially leaves the road more or less as is, just shrinking the travel lanes. And then kind of the same thing, but with the soil mill wall and the better soils. So just losing less roadway with that wall option. Or that part of the wall. So we took a look at, what it would take to potentially add bike lanes on the whole stretch of Black Nugget Road. So we did some traffic studies to see, is that feasible? Would we have issues with, vehicles turning in and out of all these driveways? I think we have something like 9 between the apartment buildings, and then the office and the retail with Fred Meyer, et cetera. So kind of on the left-hand side is our project limits or the wall area. On the very left is the intersection, that kind of area with East Lake Sammamish Parkway. And on the right-hand side, the intersection with Issaquah Fall City Road. So the issue with both of those intersections is, again, there's not a lot of right-of-way. And there's no easy way to add bike lanes there with the intersections, because those already have dedicated left turn lanes for the intersection. So there's not a lot of space to potentially add bike lanes. Basically in area 1 and 2, the dark blue on the left and the green on the right. We could add bike lanes basically everywhere in between that. So along the wall, and then kind of the teal and purple area here in between the wall and Issaquah Fall City on the right. So I guess jump into like the pros and cons. So traffic analysis shows that there's not enough volume, or there's not a huge amount of volume on this road. So we could add bike lanes. Obviously that's part of the city's overall plans to increase non-motorized facilities like bike lanes. It's in this city street standards. So those are some of the pros. The cons on adding bike lanes, the road is very steep, like I talked about, it's about 12%. It's a large drop over the course of this hill. So you're probably not getting a lot of casual bikers on that steep of a road anyway. And anybody going downhill on that would probably be more comfortable just using the vehicle lane anyway. Because, you can easily get up to vehicle speeds going down that hill.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know.
Yes.
Not hard to get going very fast, however. And then kind of the next piece is more of a safety issue that we see with adding bike lanes here. So because it's very steep, we have, well, let me back up. We have the center turn lane there right now. So for vehicles coming down the hill that maybe want to turn into Sandmar or the other office building here, or into Southeast 62nd to go to Fred Meyer Depot, that's at the kind of the bottom end of this long down, right? And the concern is that people coming down that hill, in their cars might be coasting a little faster than the speed limit. And this road curves a bit, as you can see. So if they come around the curve and suddenly there's no center turn lane anymore for that person turning left who's sitting there waiting to turn left into Fred Meyer or wherever, then suddenly they have to come to a screeching stop, and there's nowhere else for them to go if there's now a landscaping strip to their right or a bike lane to their right, and they don't have, that ability to stop them. The other issue is there's also this is a King County Metro bus route. So there's a King County bus stop actually just to the right in this picture of our wall. I think it's the Sanmar parking lot, basically. So kind of the same situation there. If you have the bus stopping to pick someone up there, you know, if there's no center turn lane and somebody's coming racing down that hill, they're not gonna have anywhere to go if we get rid of the center turn.
Issaquah, Fall City Road has bike lanes existing, I think.
So there is one on a very short stretch right at that intersection with Black Nugget Road, but that's it. There's a very short stretch of it right there, as you get to that intersection.
Okay.
Actually just drove that on the way here. But that's the only bike lane on that road. So that's kind of the other issue, is that, you know, putting bike lanes on Black Nugget is not really connected to any other bike lanes without significant changes to these intersections, which, you know, we can't do as part of this project. That's like way outside the scope of this project.
Although it would, if there were bike lanes put in on Black Nugget, then when future road changes are made and those other roads are updated, then there would be connections in the future.
Yeah, you could potentially connect it to East Lake Samash because there are bike lanes there.
Yeah.
But, you know, this is also something that could be changed, you know, further down the road as well. You know, if we're looking at changes to that intersection, to potentially add bike lanes in kind of area one, that the blue on the left, you know, you could potentially just restripe Black Nugget Road to kind of match that at that time.
Do you look at options like, you know, given that there's a wall on the side of the road, the sidewalk might not be as necessary on that side? Did you look at asymmetrical? things like that?
We haven't seriously considered that one. And the reason being that there is a bus route and there wouldn't be anywhere for people wanting to take the bus to go if we got rid of the sidewalk there.
Where do people go from that bus stop right now? To Sandmar, right? Presumably.
Presumably, or walk down the road to Fred Meyer.
So the bus is coming down the hill and that stops on the picking up passengers on the north side of this picture.
Yeah, so I think there's a bus stop, maybe two up near the apartments, and then there's one down next to Sandmar, and then there's one, I think, down near Best Buy. Could be wrong, but yeah, there's a few stops coming.
So Tanya, what you were saying, I wonder if they could move the bus stop a little bit further down to as an option and to keep the sidewalk, a wider sidewalk on one side until we get down to a place where it's a little bit flatter.
Well, and in fact, there are already bus stops flanking the wall on both sides. So the sidewalk to connect them might not be necessary.
It does seem a little bit like, at least if I were walking down there, I would prefer a larger sidewalk on one side of the road rather than a sidewalk on both sides, just because of the wall being there, but.
Yeah, I mean, if we look at that option, yeah, we could potentially look at some crosswalks, because that would be one of the issues, like.
Yeah.
Okay, if somebody gets off there, and now there's no longer a sidewalk to continue, you know, in either direction, well, okay, they need to immediately get across the road to where there is a sidewalk. And, you know, how do we get them safely across that?
I think we
on
can
a steep
assume,
road?
I think we can assume they need to cross that road anyway if they're getting off at those bus stops.
Potentially, yeah.
Yeah. And you can do the flashing arrows. My one thought, probably outside this one too, but both of those are very steep roads going up. And the only other access is going up the trail all the way up to the Highlands route where the bike route goes at the top. I'm trying to think if you're trying to get up here, how fast you get up here from different directions, and if it long term, if it makes sense to have a bike lane on one of these two roads or another alternative, you know, to the overall Highlands elevation.
Yeah.
That's a good one.
I also liked the idea of the one-sided bike lane just going up, because as you were saying, most likely if you're going down this, you're going very fast and you don't need a bike lane as much.
Wait, could we potentially put like a bike lane on one side and then a sidewalk on the other? Oh, but then we have the whole crossing issue.
Yeah. Yeah, that's something we can potentially look at. So you guys are seen this before, but this is the bicycle level of traffic stress. So basically from 1 to 4, 1 being, you know, a small kid moving along on their bike with training wheels, all the way up to someone who isn't worried about driving down Block 90 Road at high speed or is gonna challenge themselves to try and drive up that long hill.
Not far anymore though.
I'd go down that hill, but probably not up.
Yeah. It's a great training ride though.
Yeah. And then so just some more comparison of kind of the 2 road options. So what we have currently, we're looking at, you know, center turn lane and the bike lane / bike lane and landscaping strip. So currently have sidewalk on both sides, although maybe we will look at other options for that. So with center turn lane, we would not be adding bike lanes. Obviously, we would be on the other option. So the bike level of traffic stress currently is pretty high on the road. Would be slightly reduced if we had bike lanes, although again, the road is still very steep. Still pretty challenging. You know, another factor is obviously still safety. So for vehicles that are turning left into the apartments or San Mar or Fred Meyer, having that center turn lane for those vehicles that are continually stopped and waiting for oncoming traffic to go by, there's still an open lane for vehicles coming down the hill to get around them safely if they're going a little too fast. And you know, another option, we've kind of touched on this already, but there's no driveways. There's really just Southeast 62nd along the wall itself. So there's not really places for people to go to and from, at least along the wall.
Do we know how much like pedestrian traffic that sidewalk gets? Because my impression has been that there isn't a ton.
The times that I've been up there really isn't much,
And
but
so
we haven't done like a full study on how many people.
I was just, one thing about the bike lanes is, I mean, especially with very low pedestrian traffic, biking is uphill slowly, you can do on the sidewalk.
It's true as well.
So I didn't quite understand why the LTS didn't go down or downhill. Like, why is it still 3? Is it just because it's just,
Well, that's sort of an engineering judgment is, you know, do you want to be, you know, in this narrow bike lane with, you know, a curb next to you, while you're potentially going pretty quickly downhill on a bike, versus just taking the lane over, when you can easily kind of get up to 20, 25 miles an hour going down that's really steep hill. You know, I personally would feel much more comfortable just taking the lane.
Definitely, yeah.
I mean, that's probably what I would do.
Cynthia, you have a question?
Thank you. I could have a question. Are we doing the feedback part? Or are we still just gonna let you finish and ask clarifying questions and then give our feedback at the end? Because I wasn't sure. I kind of lost track of whether we're giving feedback now or at the end of your thing. That was my first question.
Yeah, I guess we have been kind of doing a little bit of feedback, but yeah, I'm almost done and we can get to like the full feedback session here shortly.
Okay, I'll just hold off then till we get to that. Thanks. Thanks, Julian.
Yeah, kind of as we touched on, this is kind of our current preference. So wall option 3, we lose about 2 feet of right of way width. And then keeping the center turn lane mostly for safety for folks turning left into San Mar, Red Barn, et cetera. And yeah, now I guess we'll open it up for full feedback.
Before feedback, does anyone have any more clarifying questions, any guiding questions, wants to bring up?
So for the bus stops, they're on both sides, right? Like going up the hill and down the hill. Okay.
so given that there's truck traffic presumably on that street for, like Home Depot and Fred Meyer and all that. Are there any special concerns about needing extra lanes for maneuvering large trucks or anything?
Yeah, I'm not sure how much truck traffic there is on Black Nugget. Yeah, yeah, I think most of them are probably going on East Lake Sammamish, but
Like they go out 62nd.
right, they'd be on East Lake Sammamish and turning in 62nd from that side, not going on Black
They don't do
Nugget.
Black Nugget.
Probably, I don't know for sure. But yeah, if there is truck traffic, you probably want wider lanes and, you probably want to keep the center turn lane for them, for sure.
I had a question about, the length, I mean, the width of the lanes, Don, bring on this as well. Like what's the discussion about, particularly uphill and down, relatively steep gradients? What's the safety, safety benefits of having a less width of the lane? Particularly when we're talking about the speed issue.
Yeah, I mean, generally, like, less wide or narrower lanes are gonna be more of a traffic calming effect, so. The wider the lane, the more comfortable people feel to drive faster usually.
Yeah.
So you make the lanes more narrow, generally people will slow down, although. I'm not so sure that's gonna be entirely the case on this road because it's so steep, but. It should have somewhat of a calming effect.
And then another question about the bike lane downhill. Is there a possibility to consider just moving that bike lane downhill and then having just uphill bike lane? Just that's in the tree.
Yeah, that was one of the options we looked at. Basically, you could just do a planter strip instead of a bike lane on the downhill side or something like that.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I think additionally for calming effects, I believe having like trees and planter strips on the side of the road is also a calming on traffic speed. So that would be, especially if on the downhill side, we're having more problems with speed, having more on the side of the road there would possibly help that.
Okay.
I have
Does
one
anyone
more.
have, you have more?
One more. So we talked about the north side of the road. We didn't talk about the south side. Is there an opportunity to extend the right of way on the south side?
Oh, yeah, that's a good question. Touch on that, but yeah, to jump back to photos here. So yeah, it's kind of hard to tell from this picture, but there's also a steep slope kind of below the road. And then we only have about 15 feet between the edge of our sidewalk and the wall behind Fred Meyer that the city doesn't own. So any amount that we move this way towards Fred Meyer, we could potentially be impacting the existing trees there. We'd be impacting that existing steep slope. And we may have to, mitigate or upgrade the wall behind Fred Meyer. So that's, additional expense that for a wall that the city doesn't even own, potentially.
Yeah.
Or could you do your own wall out a little bit, tearing it down so you're not in tiers of soil, you're not having to build their wall up and build it up under the wall.
Yeah, you could, but you kind of have the same issues you'd be every bit that you move the road towards their wall, that's putting more pressure, more weight on their wall. Yeah, we would have to mitigate it somehow.
Okay.
We're right east of 62nd.
Yeah, there is a little bit of room behind Home Depot there, east of 62nd. That's actually like pretty close to flat there for a little bit. But it really doesn't solve the bulk of the structure of this wall because there is a Fred Meyer wall below it.
So when you get to the some of the asymmetrical parts that we could put in here, like the center turn lane on the sloped part, very important for mitigating traffic incidents. On the flat part, maybe not as much, and perhaps isn't ever used.
I mean, yeah, we could certainly look at doing something asymmetrical, but, you know, if you only put in a bike lane, you know, from 62nd down to basically Best Buy, like, you know, is anybody gonna really use that?
Well, so the hypothesis
That's
was
the question.
if there's room to expand on the east side of 62nd there, and we don't need the center turn lane in between where we don't have room to expand, that opens up other options.
So there is more space there. We don't currently have a right of way. So that the Home Depot property runs up pretty close to where the edge of the sidewalk is currently. So that would, you know, there's potential there for a short stretch of that. But as you get a little bit further up the hill, you know, it gets pretty steep right off the edge of that sidewalk again. So yeah, there's maybe a little more opportunity for that short stretch, but you know, then on either side of it, you're pretty constrained by the hillside being steep.
Any other questions?
Cynthia has a-
Oh, Cynthia?
Sorry, I was ready to provide feedback. Are we done with questions?
I think so.
Do- okay.
No, you can go. Go ahead.
Okay, so could you go back to the slide with your recommended alternative?
Yeah.
We leave that one up there, maybe where we talk about it. I just want to say that first off, I've ridden this 50 times up and down easily. I haven't done it in a while, but I used to do it all the time. So I'm really, really familiar with what it feels like to ride up and down. I also I want to say that I can totally live with the recommendation that you're proposing, that I think you said this is the preferred option. I can absolutely live with it. But I thought it might be important to talk about why, and other people can say whether they agree or disagree with this. But I definitely think we need to keep, so there was a mention earlier about maybe having a sidewalk on just one side, but I really think we should keep the sidewalk on both sides. And one of the reasons is there might not be a lot of, I don't know if we have any bike counts or anything like this. I don't know how many people are using it, but we have to remember that a lot of people that are using this to get somewhere, it's the last mile, they probably don't want to be here. And we talk a lot about equity. And I think that people who are using non-motorized when it's kind of shitty are probably doing it because they have to. And I think this comes back to the equity. There's a lot of apartments around there. And I think we need to remember that even if it's not heavily used, it still needs to be safe and comfortable for people who absolutely need this to get, you know, maybe to their job at Home Depot or whatever. So I think it's really important to keep those sidewalks on both sides. I do think that with the introduction of e-bikes, I do think that it would be nice if we could have a bike lane going uphill. But if it's not feasible, I think that I could live with, because I do think it makes sense to ride on the sidewalk because it is so slow and there is such little pedestrian traffic. I mean, you're going 4 miles an hour at best on that climb. But I do think that sometimes those intersections kind of spit you out as a cyclist on the sidewalk, and those aren't safe. So right at 62nd, you know, if you were coming up from the entire and you were crossing 62nd, you kind of get spit out and you're unexpected, and that's always a little bit dangerous. So I wish there could be some, you know, kind of striping so that people might expect bikes to be on the sidewalk there when they come to those few intersections. And then I also want to say, I actually never seen this studied or in any kind of report, but I personally feel like a downhill bike lane would actually be less safe than regular bike lane. Taking the lane is absolutely the safest option. You become, you know, you're so much more visible to traffic. You can easily stay you have to brake to stay with, you know, to stay under the speed limit. So I fully support, I mean, yeah, you could easily get to 45 or 50 on this hill if, you know, there's nobody around. So I definitely think that we shouldn't have a bike lane. I think that's more dangerous. It feels intuitively more dangerous. And it's the same reason I think that center turn lane needs to stay, because if somebody suddenly slows down and you're taking the lane, and that's just a lot of reaction that has to happen at a high speed. So that could be really terrible. So for all those reasons, I think that we should, I think I support the preferred option, but I wish we could have a bike lane uphill just to separate you at those, every time the sidewalk ends and you have to go into traffic and, you know, potential traffic, there's not a lot of traffic, but every time you have to cross, I don't like the sidewalks are not meant for bikes to cross there. They're ADA ramps, and so the cars are not expecting you to pop out at those intersections, and that always bothers me. And so it would be really great if there could be some kind of standard developed that if you do have to use the sidewalk, there's some kind of striping that signals that there could be a bike crossing right there. But otherwise, I do agree that you can get away with uphill use of sidewalk because it's so slow and so poor, not very many pedestrians on it. Anyway, that's my opinion. Thanks.
Cynthia. Anyone else wanna jump in?
What she said was pretty much my whole thought process, like reviewing the presentation and stuff a couple days ago, was that, yeah, ideally, if you could have like a lane added for uphill, but not downhill. I take that road, I think every week at least. I admire it's like a pretty much stop for me and take the option of taking away the center lane. This lane was real scary because it's steep and a curve, and I just don't trust folks to not, to give themselves enough braking time without crashing. And yeah, I'm out of myself here, but I've flown down that hill and have to I'm like, oh, it's Tarns here. I gotta remember, I'm worried if we take out that center lane. I'm also don't think this is any kind of factor into the decisions on, the wall behind or whatever, but if you put a wall, is this gonna be concrete? Or is it wood like the current one? Or is that just TBD? Okay.
Yeah, that's basically the issue with the existing wall. It's built like a temporary wall and not a permanent.
Yeah, that wood was an interesting choice for that, and I'm not an engineer.
Wood
It's not
rocks.
for a permanent wall.
I could wonder when they
Not
do the space
quite
off.
sure how they got that permanent through King County.
Okay. So my thought with that is, this is just aesthetics, but you could do some, if you, instead of doing the behind, which I know is a more expensive option, and sounds like we didn't love that as much, but just could you have a cool mural, something,
Yeah.
for the neighborhood? I guess that's, another thing
Yeah.
for me that was factoring into that decision, even if it's not my primary concern or anything, but.
Yeah, actually, council members brought up aesthetics on Monday. We're not at that point yet, but point taken, and I'm definitely in favor of something to kind of break that up. So we're not just having a giant slab of concrete.
Or
Yeah.
keep the hanging gardens that are on the wood one now, make them supposed to be there. Community garden, but it's vertical. Probably not that. We definitely have to keep the sidewalks.
Okay, so when I look at the networks, especially the bike networks, this is actually a pretty good place to connect, like the East Lake Sammamish and the Highlands. And there's a lot of people, a lot of stores on the route, so a lot of places to go and places to come from. So like a bike lane on the uphill side would be awesome. I'll support Cynthia in that one as well. I also don't care as much about bike lane on the downhill side. And I do think that there's potential from an equity perspective, if nobody is on that sidewalk, then it's not an issue, right? So let's study it a little bit. Let's figure out if anybody ever takes that sidewalk.
Yeah.
When I look at connectivity, I can't come up with a reason to be on that side of the sidewalk.
Especially the side over by the wall.
Yeah.
It's a wall. There's so there's by definition no destinations, at least in that stretch. So that
Right.
I think if it's possible, I would agree that doing some kind of a research to see if people are using that side of the sidewalk, because it would be space much better used for other things on the road.
Right, so there's potential to get a little bit of space that could be used to build a bike lane on the uphill.
Which would make it a lot safer for cyclists, I think.
Yeah, I guess one other consideration, I'm just kind of thinking out loud here, but I wouldn't put the road, directly adjacent to the wall.
Yeah.
So having that little bit of space between the wall and the road is good.
Yeah, it's like
Currently using that for sidewalk.
It's like 7 feet now, you don't need 7 feet for that, right?
Okay.
It varies, but yeah.
Adding on to what you were saying, if we like don't have a sidewalk on the downhill side, and then we also saying we're gonna add a planter strip there of like plants and trees or whatever.
That's one potential option.
If we don't have a sidewalk or the planter, then wouldn't there be enough space to have an uphill bike lane and a center turn lane? Or would it still be too narrow?
No, we would not have enough space to
Oh.
keep this in the turn lane and out
Oh,
of
okay.
that portion.
Um,
So it's kind of either or.
Tom, you have?
Yeah, I have a couple of comments. One is, I like the bike lane going uphill. But I agree with the safety of having the turn lane on the downhill, so I would forego the bike lane on the uphill. I do like the idea of having the sidewalk on one side. And having either paved or cobblestone or something on the wall side, because you'll need some of that for sight distance for coming around the bend. And also we plant trees there, there's just gonna be future problems right next to the wall with trees and roots and whatnot. And then,
But like low shrubs or something.
well, I don't know if I'd even do that, just because of, you can get some ivy that can go up along the wall, and that would help color the wall, but otherwise, my concern would be primarily sight distance coming around the bends,
Yeah.
and then just a lot of future maintenance. We can have landscaping on the other side. But on the bus stop, you can always move the other bus stop down always, doesn't have to be
Yeah.
everything just work with King County Metro, we can move the bus stop a little bit. I think it's, and so once you come out of the departments up on the top, you can cross up there, because there's nothing else to do until you get down to the bottom where you're gonna be crossing anyway. I do like the idea of having maybe a slightly wider sidewalk on one side,
Yeah, I guess there's,
and that makes it a little bit better for someone biking up a hill too, with having a little bit wider sidewalk.
the only issue I see is there's several driveways here going into this complex on the north side.
Mhm.
So there's, potentially people who might come out and use the sidewalk along the wall there to go to 24-hour fitness or somewhere like that. So I mean,
Is there no crosswalks between there?
not currently, no.
I mean, yeah, I think maybe that,
You could put those in.
yeah, that problem could be partially remedied by putting a crosswalk at one of those intersections, because there's a couple of four-way intersections there that could possibly have crosswalks at them, right?
You almost wouldn't need one until you go all the way down to where the fitness place is.
Yeah.
To cross that over to the street again.
But like, yeah, I think that problem could be remedied with crosswalks, maybe.
A trail on top of the wall.
Be cool.
I'll jump in with my thoughts about this these cross sections in particular. Yeah, I mean, jumping off of what everyone else is saying, I think a bike lane uphill is pretty necessary. I mean, I rode it that way quite a lot, and compared to the alternative, the close alternative, which is the Squak Falls City, where people are 40 plus miles per hour, that stretch of hill. An uphill bike lane, even though it's a steep one, it will enhance safety for people, for both bikes and cars, because if you have a situation where, if you're biking up the hill and then the car tries to pass you, and the car is coming down into the turn lane as well, there's a possible situation there. And so I do think, and downhill, not so much. And so, based off of what everyone else is saying, look at the equity concerns, the last mile concerns, the bike issues as well there. And so, yeah, that's my initial thoughts for now. But Cynthia?
Okay, thanks, Julian. I was just gonna say that, it sounds like we're kind of divided on whether we could ditch the second sidewalk. And I guess for those of us that feel like we kind of need two sidewalks, if you ended up considering recommending or leaning towards ditching one of those sidewalks, I think just, it's probably obvious, but just want to put it on record that you've got to be really, really careful with the crosswalks, because they've got to be able to get to where they want to go safely. And it's a steep, obviously, we've talked about some of the challenges of this. So I think it's really important to make sure that if you do end up considering ditching one of those sidewalks, that there's a lot of planning and care with related to site distance and destinations for crosswalks. It just feels like there's never enough mid-block crossings and yeah, so I just want that to be really thoughtful if we did end up losing the second sidewalk.
I'm worried if we take out a crosswalk or a sidewalk and have to add crosswalks because that's coming down a curve.
Yeah, I mean, that's definitely a concern as well, like, you're gonna have people speeding down that hill.
Yeah.
And yes,
But I think the only place you
trying to
need it,
force people to cross on that is potentially dangerous.
I think the only place you need it is down, all the way down at the bottom, because there's nothing to get to on the wall side until you're down to 24 Fitness. Because everything is already on that one side of the road.
Yeah.
There's a bus stop there right at Sandmar, presumably because folks at Sandmar use that bus stop. So that would be a place to cross, and this kind of brings up that.
Or they can,
Here would be like, already people need to cross that road, and maybe it's not safe for them now, so we have an opportunity to improve things for existing.
Yeah,
could they move the bus stop down to the next intersection?
well, if there's a bus stop on the other side of the street from that office
Mhm.
complex, and there isn't a crosswalk there, that seems like a failure right now.
Exactly.
Yeah, like there needs to be a crosswalk there either way, probably.
Is that out of scope of this? Though, I mean, is with these options that we're looking at, that might be.
Yeah, it's a little out of scope for this, because, yeah, I guess I forgot to mention, so this is primarily a wall project. So
Yeah.
like, all of the road discussion is sort of secondary to like, we need to replace this wall.
Yeah.
So perhaps we need to look at, unfortunately, picking or recommending mildly one of these, I'm looking at, which is the best. Let's see.
The question is, instead of two sidewalks, is a shared use path an option? Would that be weird or I guess like out of code, if we did that?
Yeah, I'm not sure how we would do that. It would be a deviation, but we're already get some sort of deviation for this.
Yes, would that solve all the problems that we're trying to solve? I don't know. As we would have an uphill bike lane, but it would have to be shared with pedestrians, but then it's not a sidewalk, but it is wide enough.
Yeah, I mean, I guess that would be the trouble is because I think shared use path needs probably more than at least 8 feet, maybe more.
I'm not sure it'd be able to bring up like Google Maps and a street view right where the bus stops are, and you kind of see the lanes.
I also have the data from Sandmar. Looks like zero, as of 2023, early 2023, 0 people took the bus in Sandmar. So
Are they all working from home?
I don't know. 62% of Sandmar. Okay, Steve just.
Yeah.
So shared use paths will be 10 feet minimum width, so that's,
Yeah.
yeah,
That's a lot.
And we can spare here, portion.
I'm drag that person down to do a street view right where the buses are.
Do we have any stats on how many people use that bus stop?
It's 0.
Well, it's 0 for us.
There's probably quite a few people from that apartment complex.
Bus stop just to the left here. Very steep hill.
Skinny sidewalk.
And yeah, as you can see, there's, sharp curves, so people are, if they're coming down the hill a little fast, they don't have a whole lot of time to react if there's a car stopped waiting to turn left here. Or a bus stopped.
And then pan around, look down.
Yeah.
So specifically for wall options, like this, there's no wall option here that we're considering, right? The wall option is.
Well, yeah, no, this is past the wall,
Yeah.
by a little bit. So.
That's where the
We
bus
are
starts.
running overtime, on this topic. So I think where we're at generally as a group is, I'm not sure if we've come down to one single one quite yet. But generally we are, looking at, many of us do support that bike lane uphill, not bike lane downhill. So that there's that discrepancy there, and the asymmetry there. And then I think generally people are supportive of keeping that center lane. That's what I'm hearing.
Yeah, I think the center lane is agreed that that's probably a safety feature that's needed. You could bike on the sidewalk in those, and if we had room, we'd like a bike lane on the uphill side. I think right now the section is, if I were to start on the left side of this picture, it'd be a sidewalk, lane, turn lane, lane, and sidewalk. And this outstanding question maybe is that sidewalk on that side or on the other side? If we maintain that sidewalk on the one side,
So, I mean, at this point, I guess the situation is, are we getting close to that recommending the preferred option? That's,
Yeah, I don't see any reason why not go forward with wall option 3. I think there's
Yeah.
still potential road improvements that would be on the table, but if those are beyond the scope of your project, I don't think that would stand in the way of doing wall option 3.
but I think it's pretty clear that, you know, a lot of us would like to see this to be eventually connected into a larger bike network.
Yeah. And admittedly, wall option 2 would assist in connecting this into the bike network, but
Yeah.
Yeah.
Would love to do that.
yeah, but it seems like the
That's
bus,
not the choke point. So I don't actually think it would make any difference for adding a bike.
would it not?
No, because I think, well.
It sounds like option 3 is,
Seems like option 3 is just the best, but
Okay.
can we say, like, if we recommend option 3, can we say, and this is our discussion on the road options? Okay.
Okay. All right, thanks so much. Hope you got what you needed. And with that, we'll go to Squawk Mountain non-motorized improvements, discussion. I've got my friend and a friend.
Yeah, I'd like to invite Janessa and Rex up if they would like to.
I'm excited for.
That's fine. Okay, yes, so I am John Larson, Transportation Program Coordinator. We are going to be talking about the Squak Mountain Non-Motorized Improvement Plan. I'm joined this evening by Brent Powell and Janessa Benan from our consultant over at Tees. Our purpose this evening is to provide an update from the project team on the status of the Squak Mountain Non-Motorized Improvement Project study and the alternatives for the corridor. We would also like to receive feedback from you all on the proposed alternatives, which we will outline. Quick little background on the project. So this particular project first popped up in the 2015 Walk and Roll Action Strategy Plan. It basically was just this idea that was included in the sidewalk bike improvements list at the time, sort of just this, oh yeah, we could get to that at some point kind of list. In 2021, when the mobility master plan was adopted, it was included, this particular project was included in the planned non-motorized projects list. Also wanted to note that mobility master plan established the sidewalk standards for collectors. So this particular route is a collector. And that particular definition just said, you know, basically for collectors, provide standard sidewalks on one side of the street at the very least. And then in 2022, the Transportation Improvement Program, the TIP, this project was again included in the future projects list. And at the time that council went to adopt the TIP, they actually plucked it out of that list and said, let's put it into the 6-year TIP. And here we are, basically. You saw this just a little bit ago, this is our bicycle level traffic stress. This is also within the mobility master plan. The MMP states that basically we would like to have a minimum of 3 LTS on all of our streets, obviously going down 1 and 2 if possible, but 3 is very.
I don't know if that's,
That's the goal.
Like a maximum of 3, 1, 2 being.
Yes, yeah. That's great.
Squak Mountain is.
So then I'll pass it over to Brent to continue on with
Yeah.
presentation.
Yeah, so you can see here, quick vicinity map of our project study area. We have one corridor comprised of 2 different streets for this project. So we have the 12th Avenue and Mount Olympus corridor that connect into each other and change street names about halfway through there. We're in the Squak Mountain neighborhood. We're near Hillside Park. There's a middle intersection along this corridor with Sunset Way. And I think we can go to the next slide here. And so we've been at this study for over a year at this point, taking a look at some different alternatives and doing some different steps in the process. So you can see our current progress to date on this diagram here. We started with a public engagement phase because we were very curious about what the residents of this community thought about this roadway, how it functions for them today, how they might see themselves using it if it changed in the future. So we have some good data on that, and we want to share that in a second here. After we collected all that information in our first public outreach phase, we took that information to help guide the development of our alternatives. So we produced a set of, I think it was 6 or so different alternatives, and eventually worked with John and others of the city to narrow that down. And we went through a process of a design workshop that we held with city staff to help us refine those alternatives down to the 2 that you're going to see today. And that design workshop was powerful because it also expanded our view outside of just the immediate project team of John and myself and Janessa. It brought in other members of the city of Issaquah departments, including the Parks Department, stormwater, maintenance. We had different perspectives about what this roadway could achieve and some of the limitations we might be facing with this roadway here. So building off of that, we did go through a bit of a pause in the project where we sought some feedback from the Mobility and Infrastructure Committee of Council. Similar actually to what Jim was just talking about in terms of seeking some feedback about deviating from the standard practice in the city with some of our alternatives, but we did get, again, approval from the M&I committee. So here we are today. And this month here, June 2024, we have just been wrapping up the preparation for our next outreach phase, which is going to start out next month. So here is the future steps in the process for us. Launching a public survey next week to gain feedback from the community on these 2 proposed alternatives. We basically have the same set of questions we're asking the community. We have those for you to chime in on tonight. And once we have that feedback and have an opportunity to review all that data in August, we'll ultimately come together in September and develop our selection of a preferred alternative for the corridor. And then from there, it's a process of us finalizing that with some additional analysis, documenting that in a nice study report, recognizing that this project might not reach construction right away. So we don't want to lose track of these important decisions we're making now. We want to have that in a written format so that we can return later on and bring this thing to life at some point. So that's going to involve writing a report, but also then sharing it back with this group here, with the Mobility Infrastructure Committee, with the full city council, ultimately seeking approval that this would be the adopted plan for the build out of this corridor. So I'm going to share with you that public survey feedback that we received. Again, this was about a year ago that we received this feedback, but it was very strong, particularly strong, I think, in the number of responses we saw. We had over 275 community members provide input, maybe some sitting at this table here tonight, but very powerful numbers we thought for this type of data collection. So what we're showing here, the first slide, is a compare of and contrast between current uses of the corridor and potential future use of the corridor. So how we basically asked, how do you see yourself potentially using this corridor differently if we made some improvements? And we didn't tell them what those improvements would be, but we said if it was improved, could you use it differently? So the thing that I like to highlight here is the green bars are using the corridor most days. So we have walking at the top of the chart, biking in the middle, and driving at the bottom. And we were seeing that a lot of folks indicated they would expand the amount of time they would walk the corridor or run on the corridor. About a 15% group there would change from maybe a couple times a week to pretty much every day. So a nice uptick there. And when we look at the bicycle data, we're seeing somewhat similar trends there where you take the group that's using it once or twice a week as a bike route, that's about 17% of people today, might spike up to about 35%. So really a doubling in how many people would use it at least a couple times a week. And then we did see some data showing people thought they might drive a little bit less on the corridor. So that's powerful as well as we think about some of the climate initiatives for the city. Although that's, not moving the needle a huge amount, we're not going to convert a lot of people away from their cars, but it is a slight decrease here. And then on the next slide, we also asked a series of questions about potential goals for this project. And there's a lot of words on here, but we'll have a summary slide on the next page here. We were very interested in having people rank priorities for this corridor, because we recognize there need to be trade-offs. We'll talk about that as Janessa covers some of the design constraints here, but it's not the corridor where you can have it all, unless you want to pay way too much money and kill a whole bunch of trees and probably get encroach on some driveways and houses a lot more than you want to. So we recognize there are trade-offs we're going to need to make, and we wanted to understand from the community, where are those priorities lying? So we asked about safety overall, walking, biking, preserving trees, and ultimately maintaining current travel speeds or changing travel speeds. I should say, actually, the prompt we gave them was reducing travel speeds. Is that a priority for you? And so on the next slide here, we have a summary of how that all shook out as kind of a weighted ranking consideration. So the top two categories were neck and neck, basically dead even. Safety, proactive safety, and walking were the two that were prioritized above the other three. In the middle there, we have preserving trees, and then you see a drop off down to bike infrastructure, and then a further drop down to reducing speeds. So I think important for us as we went forward, we really took on that, okay, sidewalks, if we're picking and choosing between alternative sidewalks, outweigh bike lanes for this particular corridor based on the data we have. So with that, Janessa, I think you're going to walk us through now. No, John's got some slides here first.
Yes, I got a couple. Just wanted to touch on some city goals as related to this particular project. First of all, the Issaquah Climate Action Plan, strategy number one is, outlines capitalize on as many environmental and community benefits of trees and natural systems. And that'll come up when we talk about the number of trees affected by this project. Mobility master plan, the guiding principles. So there's a bunch of guiding principles within the mobility master plan. And number 4 is promote environmentally sustainable mobility. And then I have several from the comp plan. So land use policy A5 states maintain the forested character of older developed hillsides such as Squak Mountain. There's a bunch of other neighborhoods, but it was first on the list. And then land use policy B2, retain existing trees in critical areas and their buffers along the designated pedestrian corridors and other green spaces. Land use policy J1, achieve a 55% tree canopy coverage of total Issaquah by 2025. And land use policy M2 states maintain development regulations that retain desired neighborhood character, ensure adequate light, air, and open space, and protect and improve environmental quality. And then this relates to the timeline. I just wanted to clarify that moving forward, the final decision on basically which design we'll move forward with basically will happen once Critique collects and analyzes that survey data, gets back to us with those results, And then myself as the project manager, and then John Mortensen as the transportation engineering manager. We both will work together to determine which alternative to recommend based on the 2023 survey results, the internal workshop that Brent mentioned, and the 2024 survey results. And your feedback is included in that 2024 survey results list. And then you all will draft the study report, which we're very excited to get into. So pass it over to you all.
Okay, that's me. So I'll be spending the next few minutes kind of giving a summary of the alternatives. And when we started the alternatives analysis, we also looked at this kind of like full build out condition, which essentially is the, like you saw in the previous presentation, the city standard for the collector arterial. You can see again here that includes two 11-foot lanes, 5-foot bike lanes on both sides, and then a planter strip and sidewalk on both sides. And for this project, specifically, that would include converting the existing shoulder to the bike lane, and then constructing new curb and gutter, planter, and sidewalk on both sides. However, that is this alternative. It requires a significant amount of widening. And also, as you can see in the graphic there, it will require relocation of existing utility poles, and a slight shift of the roadway center line to have everything be maintained within the existing right of way of 60 feet. Next. So again, we did some initial estimates and found that that alternative has a direct impact on 170 plus trees, like actual tree trunk impact, and then about 230 plus root impacts, and then 15 plus driveways would need steep grades larger than 25%. So the team pretty much was in agreement that that wasn't a feasible alternative to pursue due to budget and all of these additional existing conditions. Also, I think it's not listed here, but it also would remove the on-street parking or shoulder parking that's there now. The planter would require irrigation and then constant or ongoing maintenance. So like Brent and John mentioned, we worked with the city to develop two alternatives, and those are alternative one, which adds a sidewalk and a bike lane, and then alternative two, which is just the addition of a sidewalk. So this side here is more shows a more detailed graphic of alternative one, again, which adds a continuous sidewalk on the west side, along with a bike lane on the southbound west or uphill side throughout the length of the project. The sidewalk, I misspoke there. The sidewalk is primarily on the west side, though it does transition to the east side, adjacent to Hillside Park, which is on the southern end of the project limits.
Sorry.
Just to be able to provide a direct access to that park.
Quick question, is this project starts at the entrance to the woods of Issaquah? Okay.
Or just a little bit beyond.
And
There's-
has the bike lane coming up the hill where the ball fields is there? So you're connecting into that with your.
Yep.
Okay.
There's already a sidewalk on one side of the road going all the way up to the woods, a little bit past the woods right now.
Right.
So we're talking about adding a sidewalk to that same side of the road,
Yes.
all the way, extending it all the way up. Okay. Yeah.
So as I said, primarily on the west side, we transitioned to the east side adjacent to Hillside Park, again, to provide access to that park. It's not shown on this particular graphic, but we are proposing also a marked pedestrian crossing to be able to allow pedestrians to safely cross. Was it on this slide?
There's one thing I'll mention. So Hillside Park currently, as you might be familiar with, the predominant entry is basically right here. I think there is some entry over here. It's not as well known.
There's an entry, there's like a cemetery below.
Cemetery.
There's an entry from the cemetery.
Yeah, so in working with Parks during that workshop, they expressed, hey, by the way, we have this plan, here you go, and it does include multiple trails within that area, and so that's the major reason why we are proposing to tie into specifically to that driveway. So, yeah.
So a quick, pro and con list, pros and cons list. I'll get to when I talk about alternative two. So this option with the bike lane is wider than alternative two. So that in essence just has more driveway and tree impacts. The pedestrian level of traffic stress is at a level 2. The bike level of traffic stress in uphill direction is 2 because of that designated bike lane. And then 3 in the downhill direction with use of that shared lane. Alternative 2, again, very basically the same, except this excludes the bike lane. Again, sidewalk on the west side, transitioning to the east side, adjacent to the park. And then bicyclists will have to utilize the shared lanes. So with this being the narrowest possible alternative, this has minimum impact on the driveways and trees. The PLTS, the same, obviously, the 2. And then BLTS in the downhill direction, also 3. However, we did find that the uphill direction, we gave it a 4 based on engineering judgment. Again, kind of similar discussion to the last presentation where the effects of the steep grade pretty much just has an influence over stress, for the stress. Anytime that you, well, I guess physical ability of any bicyclist is impacted by the steep grades. And that's why we gave it a level 4, just because it's not having that protection. It's harder to climb uphill, as we've discussed previously. This slide here, we're showing a perspective view of that intersection, Upper Cemetery and Mount Olympus. In the bottom right corner is the area of Hillside Park. So this is kind of showing the sidewalk on the west side, transitioning to the east side, and then that pedestrian crossing there. And sorry, this slide is supposed to highlight kind of the shared elements of alternative 1 and 2, and the main difference just being bike lane. We are also proposing to have a few traffic calming elements throughout the corridor and intersections. Those being some medians, some curb islands, and then I think we're also proposing some speed radar signs as well.
And on that point, we did share that goal statement and the feedback from the community that ranked reducing speed as the lowest goal. But there's a bit of a conflict there because the proactive safety was the highest goal, and we recognize speed is very intrinsically linked to safety. So instead of trying to solve maybe a corridor-wide speeding issue here, we are looking at more spot improvements for speed control, where we think there might be more vulnerable users, such as this crosswalk, with a median island to hopefully reduce travel paths and reduce speeds that way. So, we want to recognize that we heard that feedback from the community, but we still do think there's merit in adding in some traffic calming on this corridor.
What is the speed that cars travel on the road right now? I know the speed limit's 25.
Speed's 25. Our data is showing it's about 33 or so for the typical driver. So it's not, it hasn't bubbled up to an absolute critical need to solve, but it's high, relative to the speed of the road.
So, yeah, I think.
On the next one.
So this again is just a quick comparison table between the two alternatives. I think we pretty much talked about the top half of the table. But I do want to flag some values for the bottom two rows. Alternative one, causes, 8 driveways to have slopes greater than 15%. I can add, I'm just removing the 2 existing that are there. And then similar for alternative 2, there's only 6 total, but with driveways steeper than 15%. And then for the tree impacts, we have 17 direct versus 2. And then alternative 1 has about 100 more root impact than alternative 2. And just a quick note on that, we did do those tree impact values were kind of based on on-site field observation measurements and not done by an arborist. But that is planned to be performed, or an arborist review to be performed during design. So just want to flag that. These are very rough numbers. We were out there and did some measurements.
Question on the trees, are they, a lot of the trees, are they large trees, or are they kind of smaller trees, or it's a mixture of them?
It's mixture.
What's the total length of this project area?
About a mile.
Thanks. Yeah.
Okay, so in terms of tree impact, I'm not quite sure how to think about this. You might think that there could be some really old growth trees on the route, and so those might be more impactful than, you know, small trees that are just kind of
What I'm saying.
But we might also look at it just in terms of like square footage of forested area that we're reducing, and look at that as, I don't know, a percentage of the city canopy. Do you have any recommendations on how we should think about this?
Yeah, it's an interesting challenge because with alternative 2, what we're really proposing to do is convert one of the existing shoulders, that's an asphalt roadway shoulder today, to a sidewalk. So the width of the roadway doesn't actually expand very much for the bulk of alternative 2. But there are a lot of root systems that have grown underneath the roadway to the point where once we start building a sidewalk there or doing the necessary drainage improvements to install stormwater pipes along the roadway, we're going to impact those trees to the point where we think they're very likely that they would, be dying because of the results of the project. So I don't know off the top, and we haven't prepped any sort of analysis of canopy impacts. I didn't know that is a goal statement for the city. Haven't looked at that yet. So at this point, we just have these kind of raw numbers, and yes, we have done a little bit of a review of how large some of these trees are, but not top to bottom.
Yeah, maybe I'm overthinking it, but if you're impacting the roots of the existing tree, is a new tree going to eventually take its place and sort of parity with that? That's where I get stuck thinking about what is the real impact in terms of the specific goals of increasing the canopy.
And I believe, John, we would have to go through some mitigation process. Sure. Removing a bunch of trees means we have to plant a bunch of new ones, or potentially pay into a fund for future plantings. Would those occur right in this project area? Would they occur elsewhere in the city? I think that would be determined later. Yeah. I think we have a couple more.
No, actually.
Oh, we're into our discussion questions there. So should I jump into these, or do we want to do the clarifying questions?
Yeah,
Yeah.
was there any
Any
questions?
clarifying questions, folks? We only have about 15 minutes to talk about it, unfortunately.
Can you go back to that slide that showed like what the residents, what their preferences or whatever were?
Okay. Yeah, we have 3 of them in there.
Yeah, that one, the weighted one.
The weighted one, yep.
Okay, so in that case, I feel like it would make more sense to do option 2, because biking is a lower concern than preserving the trees, so. Like, it would
Yeah.
make more sense than just to,
Still, do you have a clarifying question?
oh, it's one
Yeah,
question, sorry.
questions, yeah.
Sorry.
To clarify that one a little bit, though, if you look at the proactive safety, a big part of that, I think, is safety for biking.
Oh,
and
okay.
all that. So take that with a grain
Oh.
of salt, I would say.
Yeah.
Other questions? Okay. I guess we can.
Sure.
continue that,
So we'll pivot back. We
Discussion.
Yeah, we have a set of questions here, and as I mentioned, these are the same types of questions we're sending out to the public on the different concepts, but what we're really trying to understand, and the way we've kind of framed it here, we have different categories that we're asking folks to evaluate and think about these two different alternatives and thinking through, for each of these categories, are we doing the right amount for with the project? Are we doing too little with the project? Are we doing too much with the project? So I think we would like to just open this up as a general, maybe go one by one, provide feedback if you wish to, on one or more of the categories here, but we're interested in understanding if you see maybe where we've missed the mark, or some of these alternatives don't hit that sweet spot. That's really good feedback to know.
If everyone wants to jump in for like just briefly, and then we can do a little bit deliberation afterwards.
I do live on Squak Mountain, and so this is like directly impacting where I live, and I also know a lot about this specific corridor because I'm on it like almost every day. And so from the perspective of like cycling, I think a lot of the things we were talking about the other one kind of apply here, where like I think that it's not a super low pedestrian traffic area, but I think that cycling up on the sidewalk and down on the road is a viable option, especially since option 2 avoids a lot of impacts. Like, I don't think that a bike lane is vital here. It would be nice, but it looks like it would cost a lot, and I'm not sure that and as somebody who does bike Squak Mountain, I'm not sure that it would be worth as many impacts as it has, because it's a mountain, and going up, you're going to be going at like 4 miles an hour at most. Like,
I lived in the woods of Issaquah for 10 years, so I know that out pretty well. And it's, as you go up that bend, I mean, it gets really dark with the tree cover.
Yeah.
Going up that road with moss on the road, so. My preference would be to have bike lane, but I also understand, especially when you get to that like 30% grade right at the end, you make that right turn. But then the question on looking at the survey with trying to preserve the trees over the biking part, you know, keeping that into account. I'm kind of mixed on whether I'd like to have the bike lane, but I'm mixed whether I would say it has to be in there or not.
Okay.
It's hard to not frame this almost from like a climate perspective as a, do we knock out a bunch of trees, but now we have a bike lane and like therefore maybe reduce some car traffic, or we don't have a bike lane, so that's less of an option for bikers, but we kept trees. Like that's like, yeah, it's tough for me.
Does the carbon reduction
Right,
replace the trees that
exactly.
would be carbon reproducing anyway? So.
Which I know based off of like the city's like goals and plans, like we would be replacing those trees eventually somewhere.
Yeah.
But
I don't know.
So I had a hard time with these study results in general from a statistics perspective. I found what would you do in the future very comforting, and people will say, yeah, I would do more of that. I have a hard time interpreting that in terms of like, if we said we're not going to make any improvements at all, are you going to walk more in the future? Would they have said the same thing? And so like that's the level of statistical analysis I think needs to be applied here to pull out that personal bias. And then the rank the 5 options is definitely a leading question. Right, so it's like we're doing this project. Which of these 5 things that I'm giving you are you interested in? Doesn't give them the question that like, do you want a sidewalk at all? Wasn't really asked there as far as I can tell. And I know at least in my neighborhood, it's not an arterial, so like we don't have a whole lot of traffic on there, but I don't think the residents in my neighborhood want a sidewalk. Do the residents here want a sidewalk or not? I think that's a pretty important question. So, and that might lead to alternatives like, put an uphill bike lane, but don't put a sidewalk in. Maybe people will be happier with that.
I agree with what you were saying, Lemire, with like the whole thing about like bicyclists can just use the sidewalk.
I mean, especially since the biggest problem with sidewalks for biking, as far as I can tell, tends to be trash cans and mailboxes. And there, a lot of that stretch wouldn't have those doesn't have those anyway in that area, is my impression. But I mean, I think having a sidewalk there would be really nice.
Yes.
Cynthia, do you have any thoughts?
Yeah, I'm actually thinking a little bit about this idea of if we have a bike network that requires that we've made a decision to have it be using the sidewalk, I just think we need to really think through every time that sidewalk comes in, interfaces with traffic at an intersection or a driveway, because there is some anecdotal research and personal experience with this idea that if you're on the sidewalk, you're not, cars aren't really expecting you. And so you get sort of spit out at intersections. And so I guess I'm just thinking that, I just think we need like a kind of higher level discussion about what it means to rely on a sidewalk to fill a gap in a bike network, and what are the standards for that. And I don't know the answer to that question, but I just think we have to be really, really careful when we make a decision that we don't need a bike lane and we want, and I actually am kind of torn on this, so I don't have a strong opinion one way or the other. But if we do lean towards that uphill, and I think I feel the same way about the downhill, I think taking the lane is safer and people are comfortable with that. But I'm just really uncomfortable with this idea of, they can just use the sidewalk without it really being evaluated as a bike facility, because sidewalks aren't always great bike facilities. It's not just, I think the trash cans is a good point, but it's also just every time there's driveways and stuff. So that's what I think.
Thanks, Cynthia. Yeah, so it seems like right now what we're at is division between option 1 and option 2 in terms of the viability of, in terms of sidewalk being a viable part of the bike network, and then also some division on whether the survey presented the issues correctly or not. And then also something about the trees being a consideration there as well. Yeah.
I think that for future research, doing research on like actually how many people bike here, how much of that is like how much of those different categories of cyclists are trying to use this hill. Because at least anecdotally, my experience has been that most of the time there's a transit center there. So this has the capacity to be a very like high use bike lane. So I just think that there needs to be more research as to like how many people are actually biking and walking versus how many people say that they're going to use it for that, because like that seems like it would be valuable to making this decision.
I would think a sidewalk would definitely have a lot more benefit of people walking.
Yeah.
Talking through my thought process on this, generally, when it comes to advent of e-bikes and all this whole issue, right? I think it would be risky to ask e-bikes to necessarily go on the sidewalk.
Yeah.
And, even if some of these e-bikes are pretty low power, it's just helpful to just, help you up the hill, supplemental power. And even then, it'd be pretty risky to ask them to go on the sidewalk when there might be some kids going down the hill or up the hill, and there might be a risk of collision there. And so I think it is pretty valuable to maintain like a you know, a dedicated bike lane going up the hill and completing it all the way to, do that, flat section, along the park as well. And I understand the tree consideration, but there's possibility of mitigation. And I think this is like a once in a time length, opportunity to fix this right of way and make some positive impact, especially as light rail will eventually come in town, and as e-bikes are coming in as well.
I think the fact that the transit center there is extremely important to this conversation, because like that is the road that everyone who lives on Squak Mountain would use to get to the transit center. I mean, that's the road I use to get to the transit center.
Yeah. So I think that the main dividing point for this so far is kind of the viability of a sidewalk as a bike option. I think we have two folks who are thinking about that issue, saying that it is a possibility, a possible bike facility, and then the rest of us are relatively opposed to that idea. I got my conception rights.
And so I just wanted to clarify my earlier positions. I actually am in favor of the option one with the additional bike lane. I just feel like the basis for making that decision is a little bit loose at this point.
I'd be leaning toward that as well.
I would
Option one.
agree with that too. I also like it seems like the neighborhood was not as jazzed about a bike lane. And I know like other people might think there's parks there. There's things that people from outside just the immediate Squak area might be using the bike lane for. So I don't want to like use that as the total focal point, but it's cost.
We're really interested to see the difference in the responses, because the last survey was, hey, if we did something, would you use it? Versus, hey, we have these things. Would you use, like, the difference between a hypothetical and like seeing a drawing is going to be really interesting to see.
Yeah, and we did include a question specifically, does the addition of a bike lane in this alternative one cause you to be more likely to use a bike on this corridor? We asked that explicit question to them.
So with the next survey, would that be a survey? Would that be an open house as well?
Online survey,
Online.
same format we did before with the good response rate.
So I think it depends on how divided we are in terms of option 1 and 2, but are we coming to
I think-
a division here?
I think I'd say I could agree with option 1, but I think that there possibly needs to be, and I think that your point about the e-bikes kind of helped convince me that like, I don't think that many people without an e-bike would be, I mean, there's some really bad grades there, would be like regularly, I don't think many people are currently regularly using that for like cycling, possibly because there's not a bike lane. I think mostly just because the grade is very steep, but with e-bikes making that a lot easier, I could see it becoming a higher traffic corridor for bikes in the future, which gives more of an incentive for option 1.
I could be swayed to option 1. I have to remind myself that like the trees will be replanted somewhere.
I think I'm in the same boat, especially after, as you were saying, e-bikes, like in this anecdotal piece of evidence. I tried an e-bike at the bike fest at Raging River, and like climbs that I'm usually either walking up or going up in my easiest gear at 2 miles an hour, I was going up at like 10 miles an hour on the e-bike
Yeah.
in turbo mode. So it's like they really shouldn't be on sidewalks.
Yeah, I think with a normal bike, but yeah.
Cynthia, do you have one?
Yeah, I'm a soft vote for alternative 1. I didn't hear, and I'm sorry, I can't remember the new people's names that, on the side that John Larson friend, you said that you liked alternative 1, but you didn't like the rationale for it. I didn't quite catch that. Could you repeat that?
Oh, yeah. So I was looking at the evidence that was provided from the survey in these slides, and I thought that the interpretation of them was loose and ambiguous. And so, specifically the first one about what would you do in the future, right? It's great to see that twice as many people say they're going to bike, once a week or more. But would they have said that anyway, even if we weren't doing any improvements? And that's sort of a challenge there. And then the ranking, the 5 options, if you look at the question on that, they're overlapping. You're only giving 5 choices. It leaves a lot out. I'd like to see, it sounds like there are more questions that were in the survey that aren't in these slides. Is that right?
There was also an open-ended question for sure, and we did see a lot of specific mentions of add sidewalk. I think that was
Yeah. So
75 plus specific references to please add a sidewalk here. So
great.
I do feel like there's a lot of support. I mean, but I understand your.
I just haven't seen it. That's the thing.
I would.
So can I just finish my thought? So thank you for answering my question. I just was gonna say that I definitely would go with alternative 1, but I think that a big thing that pushes me over to that is because I don't think just backwards looking about who is using it. I think that e-bikes change everything, and I think the transit center, I mean, I think we have to think longer term. So yeah, that's why I do think there's a case to be made for both, and I could live with both, but I think I would go with alternative 1. Thanks.
And I would second what Adam said about the survey. Like, I just think that a lot of those questions were very, like, there was no control. It was, a lot of those questions were hard to get useful information out of because of the way they were worded, or like you were saying, like, it's just the second batch of questions, half of them basically mean the same thing. It's like, or they could be interpreted to mean the same thing. So I guess I didn't find that particularly helpful.
Okay, so I guess we are pretty much in consensus for alternative 1. If not hardly, but some folks.
Consensus, but got a lot of tears about old growth trees.
I don't think there's a lot of old growth on that corridor. It's like mid-growth. I think Squak Mountain was completely logged in this like 50 years ago or something. Like,
I think a lot of them are maples too.
Yeah.
This is-
and I don't, yeah, there's a lot of nice maple trees there, which I will be sad about if they go away, but
They grow very quickly though. So.
yeah. So hopefully they can be replanted. That's because having that road be shaded is also very great for pedestrians and cyclists.
Thank you.
In hindsight, we probably should have included, on the website, we have on the city's website, the Squak Mountain Non-Motorized Improvement Plan. There is a link at the bottom to the survey.
The
report,
data summary.
which we probably should have included this evening, so I apologize for that.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
Could you guys send, or could you send a link to that just so we can look at it?
All right, and final list, so I'm running a little bit over time today. The reports, so we can go with the board work plan, just a brief overview of that.
Absolutely. Very quickly. Throw it up here for those of you who weren't here when we approved it. So this was our working plan. The gray was the scheduled topics. The yellow was, we don't know, but it's sort of in this range of topics. The changes to that will include, traffic calming is still going forward for next month, I believe, I hope. I'm pretty sure I'm gonna get there. And then the Squak Mountain Non-Motorized Improvement Project will come back to you all in September, October. We'll decide at some point. Concurrency looks like it's probably going to be November. So, yes, so obviously concurrency isn't here now in June, but I think we're still on track for November. I-90 crossing is officially going to be in September. Light rail visioning is officially going to be in October, and everything else is still yellow. So, find that out.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
And then the staff reports.
Yes, I wanted to note in the packet, I should have gotten it up before now. In the packet, I included a letter, a thank you letter from city council. Let me share this. Up. Go. This is a thank you letter from city council for all of your hard work on the tab. Signed from city council. So I just wanted to share that with all of you. The only other thing I think I want to hit on is obviously we have our 2 new members, which we're already getting great feedback from you today, which is great. Wanted to note that obviously last meeting 2 months ago, Dave Wagner stepped down. He was supposed to be here, but decided to step down due to health reasons. Because of that, Adam, even though you're an alternate, you're basically going to step up every month. So you will be a full-fledged voting member pretty much through the whole year. So yeah.
Sounds good.
Like we're done with any kind of applicant pool, like they're not gonna reopen it since we had a resignation.
Yeah, correct.
Is Hani still on the board? Is he just not here today?
Yeah, he is. So yeah, like Amy, yeah, they're all still on. They just couldn't make it.
And then chair report, and that's me. Cool. Well, I wanted to mention a couple of things. Look forward to serving as chair for the next term for next year. Got a couple of initiatives I want to work on and add a couple of things hopefully going forward. And I wanted to go and thank Cynthia for her service as chair previously. She was a really great person to be chair and someone that'll try to fill her shoes. And so, how many years were you chair, Cynthia?
I'm not sure. I think it's at least. I think it was because it was when Nina left, and I think it was 3 years ago.
Okay.
So I was vice chair for a while with Nina, and then she left and became chair. I liked it, but it's time for some new blood. So welcome, Julian.
Yeah. Thanks for your service and definitely taught me a lot. So yeah, great. Thank you. And that's all I have. And then youth reports.
I don't have anything this month.
Okay, all good. Cool.
School's
Well,
Yeah, school's done.
Congrats.
okay, and with that, 8:04, there's no other business or announcements. We'll adjourn.
I just have a
Oh.
question. Did I miss, I'm so sorry, we want to leave. Did I miss, like, cause I was late, I missed like introductions or did we not do those? Can we do?
Yeah.
we
Want to
do
do
that?
introductions?
This is what happens when I'm chair. Yeah, we could do a round of introductions. Well, you know me, so I'll let you go on.
I'll go. Julian, been on the tab since 2021, vice chair since 2022, and now chair. And
What part of Issaquah do you live in?
I live in Squak.
I'm Erica. I've been on tab since 2020. I think I was appointed then, and then now I'm a regular member. I live in the Highlands, and I miss them.
Yeah, I'm Adam. I live in Old Town, just down the street. And let's see, this is my first board that I've been on, although I'm also on the strategic plan update task force. People through that. Yeah, and I've been in Issaquah. I actually first moved to Issaquah in 1998, and then left and then moved back about 8 years ago.
Avi, I've been on the board since November, and then I live just above the zoo.
I'm Lemire. I just got appointed to this board, but I live at Squak Mountain and I have been in Issaquah for like most of my life since I was in kindergarten. I went to school at Clark when Clark was down there instead of up there. I never went to that Clark. I'm too old for that. My younger brother went there. It was very weird to me because I'm like, this was IMS. And this is still weird to me that Clark is there. It would never be normal.
Yeah, I know the elementary middle school's coming.
Tom.
Oh, I'm Tom McDonald. I've been on the board since it started, actually. And I've lived in Issaquah on that side of Squak Mountain by Tibbetts for 10 years, and now on this side, just on off of Wildwood. And civil engineering background, and yeah, so it's
Cynthia?
Cynthia?
So Tom, I don't know if you said that, but Tom and I are the OG tab members when the tab was formed in something like 2017. And
really better than
my-
80 ancient.
Say again?
OT is better than AG, ancient.
Oh. Yeah, I've been on the tab for a while. I've been living in Issaquah for 8.5 years, but I've been living next door to Issaquah for 20 years, 20 years before that. So I've been here a long time. Welcome to the new people. Super glad that you guys are stepping up.
Thanks, it's been fun so far.
So Cynthia and I were help as we're putting the original mobility master plan together. So it was kind of fun to that, and then actually now start using it as we look at projects and plans.
All of that, the intros at the end, but that's totally fine. We'll be adjourned at, yeah. Cool. Okay, well.
Well, welcome to the board also. I'm glad you guys.